The Triumph Scrambler 1200 XC. Is it an adventure bike? Yes. Okay, that's it. End of the video. No, seriously. You see a lot of reviews, a lot of opinions, because it's a pretty bike. It has a lot of form over function, most notably that exhaust. Looks fantastic, but it gets very hot up here. I have decatted it and it makes a big difference. But it also, you've got this, so now you can't really put anything on that side. You can, but it really sticks out a long way. I've put one box on the side. But you know what? I carried all my camping gear. I carried my tent, my sleeping bag, my mattress, my pillow, my seat, a solo stove, everything I needed. I've seen reviews where they have put this back to back against the Africa Twin, which has an 1100cc parallel twin engine, lots of suspension travel, and apart from the plastics and the fact that it has a more practically designed exhaust route, they're extremely comparable. Oh, and this has got twin rear shocks as opposed to a single, which, you know, as long as you dial them in right, they should work as one. So it works. Now that I'm not quite home yet, as you know, I don't live out here. I'm having an adventure, and I have ridden so far on this trip about 800 miles. The vast majority of which is on road, and that's a thing. So the Triumph XE is the all singing, all dancing, a little bit more travel on the suspension, a little bit more aggressive, extra rider aids with the EMU and all that fun stuff. But the XE is like when you buy a Jeep and you lift it and you put the big wheels on it and a winch, and it's really, really capable off-road. But do you need it on-road? In fact, having all that extra stuff compromises its on-road handling. Now, if you're going to be doing a lot of off-road, then get the XE, hands down. But the XC is almost as good. It's like it's just had a 4-inch lift and a little bit of tweaking. And it does just about everything that the XE can do. Triumph have discontinued the XC because they are so similar, and they've made the X, which is more road. It's got a lower seat again. It hasn't got quite as complicated electronics, a little bit less suspension travel, yada yada yada. So they've differentiated between the X and the XE. I guess E is for Explore, maybe, I don't know. And for me, that's a shame, because this is the best choice for me, because I do the overwhelming majority of my riding on road. So having a super capable off-road bike, other than the looks of it, serves me no purpose. In fact, you know, it doesn't handle as well because it's got the 21-inch front wheel, it's got the thinner tyres, it's got these pseudo knobblies, the Metzler Tourants, which are predominantly a road tyre, but they have some off-road capability. So is it really an adventure bike? Well, okay, I've just had an adventure, not quite home yet, like I say, but I carried all my camping gear inside this really good Rhino Walk. I'd never heard of them, got it off Amazon, and it's worked really, really well. Straps down, everything's good. 35 expands from 23 to 35 litres, and I carried all my camping gear in there. And then in terms of my clothing and extra odds and ends, I got it all in there and in there. So the Triumph has a USB port unhelpfully under the seat, so I just routed a extension and I just plug in my phone there, so I've got my sat nav, as it were, and off I went on an adventure. And here comes the interesting bit. So part of my adventure, I was planning to ride some fire roads like this. Wouldn't that be exciting? And the route I planned, I looked on Google Maps and I found a route. I thought, this looks good. And it started off looking like this, and then it got worse and got kind of crappy and turned into maybe an ATV trail. And it got worse and worse. But the thing is as you keep going, you think, well, I don't want to go back because I've got so far. And also I just had to get through that thing. And I don't want to turn around and go back and do that thing. So there were water crossings, there were rocky descents, like big drops where you just have to trust yourself and let it roll. Okay, let me back up a little bit. I have a little bit of off-road riding experience, a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean I used to own a Honda XL 200, which was light and underpowered, and I used to green lane on that. I had my very first motorcycle was a Honda MT5, a 50cc, and I used to just fool around on that, but it wasn't, I wouldn't call it off-roading. I was just being a kid who was 16 with a sort of dirt bike. And then a bit later I got a Suzuki TS 250, which wasn't what I hoped for, but you know, I used to fool around on that in like, it was like a pit bike. And then I got a Yamaha WR 427. I used to ride enduros. I didn't race, I rode them, and that was fun. And then for a week I did an off-road riding course on Honda CRF 230s, CRF 250, which was way better. That was the one I used to try and grab the keys for. And a couple of DR 350s. You notice that the biggest engine I've mentioned so far is 427. So big difference to a 1200cc. Big difference. This engine, Triumph's parallel twin 1200, they put it in the Speed Twin, they put it in the Bobber that they have, they put it in a Bonneville. I mean, it's a road bike engine that they've shoehorned into this off-road frame. Gobs of torque, which is great from very low down, which is actually really useful off-road. So I have a little bit of off-road experience. I'm not like an ex-motocross or anything like that. I'm not a Paul Patares or whatever you say his last name. Anyway, I took this bike where I didn't want to go. I took this bike where I shouldn't have taken it. I took this bike where it shouldn't have been able to get out, by a lot of luck and some skill, knowing not to hit the brakes, just let it roll, just let that front wheel get over the obstacles, the back wheel will track, knowing when to use the gas, knowing when not to. I went down some bad descents, and then unfortunately the road was blocked. So I had to turn and go back up with the back wheel all over the place as it fought for traction with this tyre, which isn't designed to get traction in loose stuff. I ended up having to stop the bike as I went down a track which was unable to navigate back up, and then it was completely destroyed further on. So I had to find a route just totally cross country through the woods in order to escape the predicament I was in. Lack of preparation, lack of planning, totally my fault. But I survived. I didn't drop the bike. That was amazing. And I tell you this tale of woe and misfortune simply because this bike handled it. It's too big, it's too heavy, but damn, it got through it. And it did it easily. The limiting factor was me, it wasn't the bike. So bearing in mind that was such a ridiculous test of its ability, bearing in mind that is not where you should be taking a bike like this. If you're having an adventure and you're not going dirt biking or something like that, if you want to get from where you live across the country and see beautiful places like this and ride on roads like this, and even more technical than this, you could do single track, you could, as long as, I mean, I did deep sand, I did it all. It will do it. It absolutely will do. You can have an adventure on this bike. And other than the lack of wind protection and things like that. So limiting factors. This bike will easily, I don't know what the top speed is. I haven't tried to rev it out, but it easily will do 100 miles an hour. I know from riding it on a private stretch of road. But the thing is, over about 72, I usually set the cruise control for 72. It just becomes exhausting because of the lack of wind protection. And this little screen makes a big difference. This adds another 5 to 8 miles per hour onto your sustained top speed. Otherwise, it's just intolerable for a long way. Look at all these bugs. Ugh. This is great for protecting it, but terrible for cleaning it. Anyway, I digress. So something like an Africa Twin, something like a BMW, you're going to be something like a Triumph Tiger. You're going to be able to cruise faster. You're going to be able to cruise in more comfort. You're not going to get as tired as quickly. But if you just slow it down a little bit, you know what I found? When you slow down to kind of 65, you start to look around. You start to enjoy where you are. You start to really not just focus on the road, but focus on what's around you. And you start to look at things like this and go, wow, where am I? I'm having an adventure. And then when you do get a little bit adventurous and you stray off the tarmac, this will absolutely handle it. And that's cool. It's really good fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed having this adventure without blasting around at hyperspace. Another fun thing about this bike, more so than any other bike I've ever owned, is every single time, I don't mean like every now and then, I mean every time you stop to fill up with gas, and you know, okay, not at the pump per se, but when you kind of stop and you're stretching your legs and you're having a drink and you're grabbing a protein bar, multiple people, not just guys but girls too, they come up and they're like, and at the very minimum it's like, hey, nice bike, and you go, well, thank you very much, I like it too. But inevitably someone comes up and goes, oh, you know, how do you compare that to the BMW GS? How do you compare that to the Triumph Tiger? How do you compare? And you have to be honest. And now I can say with some authority, I think it compares really well. If the difference is how it looks. The difference is this high level exhaust, which has its pros and cons. The difference is the relative lack of wind protection, weather protection. But in terms of performance and capability and where it can take you and the things it can do and the adventures that you can have, it absolutely is up there with the very best. And everyone wants to talk to you about this bike. They're all like, wow, that looks nice. And you say, well, yes, I know, it's mine. So, the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XC. Is it an adventure bike? Well, I've just had a great adventure, so yes.